I'd like to look at the mitzvah of Kibud Vaem, and in particular at the Gemara's presentation of how much Kibud Vaem is required, as we would describe in general halachic terms, the shiur of Kibud Vaem. Each mitzvah that we do has a certain measure of how much has to be done. So how much Kibud Vaem has to be done to fulfill the mitzvah. And this is something that the Gemara deals with very directly and extensively. And the sugya begins, Kibud Vaem. How far does it go? What's the shiur? So the Gemara's first response, Amar Lahem, Rav Ula said to the students, Tzu'u ma asa oved kochavim echad ba'ashkelon. Take a look at what a particular Gentile did in Ashkelon, V'dama ben Nesina Shemo, whose name is Dama, the son of Nesina. Pam achas bikshu chachamim prakmachia b'shishim ribos char. So there was a certain time where the chachamim wanted to do some business with him, and he would have earned 600,000 of their currency as income. And the keys were resting under the head of his father. And in order not to disturb his father, who he knew did not want to be disturbed, he gave up on this opportunity of revenue, of this business opportunity, in order to protect his father from being disturbed. Similarly, the Gemara continues, as they asked Rabbi Lazar, Ad heichan kibud avaim, Amar lahem tzu'uru ma'asa oved kachavim echad la'aviv ba'ashkelon v'dama ben Nesina Shemo. He also said, I'll tell you a story of a non-Jewish person named Dama ben Nesina in Ashkelon. Bikshu mimenu chachamim avanim la'efod b'shishim ribo sachar. The chachamim wanted to buy certain precious stones that he had for the garments of the Kohen Gadol, and there was 600,000 profit. V'Rav Kahana masni b'shmonim ribo, or maybe 800,000. V'hayam munach tachas miroshosav shel aviv v'lo tziro. He didn't make him up. Here we have either a different story or likely a different version of the same story, and this is an example of how far we should go. L'shana hacheres nasan hakadosh baruch hu scharo. The Gemara describes that the following year he got his payback. Shenoldu lo para aduma be'edro. A para aduma, a perfect calf that could be used for the carbon of para aduma, which is very, very rare and precious, was born to him. Nichnasu chachmei Yisrael etzlo. The chachamim came to him. Amar lahem yodeani bachem she'im ani mevakesh mikem kol mamon sheba'olam atam nosimli. He said, I know I can charge you whatever I want. There is no market value. It's one of a kind. Ella ein ani mevakesh mikem ella osa mamon shefsadati b'shvil kabad ava. I only ask for the money that I lost, that I gave up for respecting my father last year. So here in the story, what's interesting is, first of all, that both the Chachamim, both the Gemara itself and Dama ben Nesina, perceive this event of the Para Aduma as a direct relationship to his previous action of respect for his parents as a reward. In other words, that this is considered to be an ideal or exemplary Kibud Vaem, and he decides not to ask for more money. Why not? If it was worth more, what's wrong with asking for more money? I think the Gemara is trying to say that he recognized that this event was directly related, and the purpose why he had the Para Aduma was to pay him back for Kibud Vaem. So it was that exact amount of money that he asked for. Rabbi Chanina concludes and says, Ma mi she'eno mitzuva ve'osa kach mitzuva ve'ose al achas kama v'kama. If this is how far one goes who's not obligated, because the non-Jews are not obligated per se in the mitzvah of Kibud Vaem, it's not one of the 7 mitzvahs of Bnei Noach, so how much more so Jews who are obligated in this mitzvah should do at least this much of Kibud Vaem. The Amar Rabbi Chanina gadol mitzvah ve'ose mimi she'eno mitzvah ve'ose, because it's a greater mitzvah when someone is commanded. So if someone who's volunteering, which is a lesser mitzvah, goes this far, kal v'chomer, someone who's commanded should go at least this far. So here's the Gemara's response. What's the shiur of Kibud Vaem? So they respond with a story, because Kibud Vaem can't be quantified in volume or in inches or in kezesim. So we need a story to illustrate how far it goes. And this is a story that is chosen right now. The Gemara now becomes slightly diverted on a slight tangent, which is about this kal v'chomer, comparing one who is obligated to one who is not obligated. Amar Rav Yosef, who was blind, would say, Mereish hava amina, I used to say, Man zahava amar li halacha k'Rebbi Yehuda, da amar suma patur min ha-mitzvos, avidna yomatava l'rabbanan. If anyone will paskin for me that a blind person is exempt from mitzvos, I'm going to make a party, I'm going to throw a kiddush for all the chachamim. D'halo mifkidna v'ha avidna. Because it would mean that I am not commanded to do mitzvos, and I have done mitzvos my whole life. So if you paskin, if you rule that I'm exempt from mitzvos, that will mean that every single thing I've ever done is extra credit, and it would be an extraordinary celebration for me, and therefore I would throw a party. Hashta dishamita lahad amar b'chanina gadol mitzvah ve'ose yoser mimi she'eno mitzvah ve'ose. Now that I've learned from Rabbi Chanina that it's greater to be commanded, it's a greater mitzvah when one is commanded, Adarabba, it's just the opposite. Man da'amar li de'ein halacha k'Rabbi Yehuda avidna yomatava l'rabbanan. Now I'm going to throw a party only for the opposite. If someone would rule that we don't follow Rabbi Yehuda and that I'm obligated, because now that I see that it's more of a mitzvah to be obligated, I'd rather be obligated. So here you have this anecdote revolving around this ambiguity of whether it's greater to do a mitzvah under command or whether it's better to volunteer to do a mitzvah. The Gemara now returns to the topic of Kibud Vaem and to the specific question of the shiur of Kibud Vaem. Ki asa Rav Dimi Amar, when Rav Dimi came to Bavel, he said, Pamachas hayalavush sirkon shel zahav hayayoshe ben gdolei romi. That once he was wearing this great golden cloak, robe, hayayoshe ben gdolei romi, and he was sitting amongst the gedolim, the prominent people of Rome. Ubasa imo, and his mother came, v'kara'asa mimeno, and she ripped it off of him. V'tafchal al rosho, she hit his head. V'yarkal b'fanav, and she spat at him. V'lo ichlima, and he didn't do anything to embarrass her. This is how far Kibud Vaem goes. And further anecdotes. Tana avime berei derev avahu. Yesh ma'achil la'aviv pisyoni v'tardo min ha'olam. There are some people who can feed his father the finest foods, pheasant, fish, but nevertheless that will be a great. He can be punished for this lack of Kibud Vaem. V'yesh matchino berei chayim, and some can cause his father to have to grind it in a mill. Umevio l'chayeh ha'olam haba, and that act of respect of causing his father to work in a mill will bring him to Olam Haba for his great Kibud Vaem. And here Rashi and Tosos and the Talmud Yerushalmi give background into why these specific examples are chosen and what the context is. But the unifying theme is that what Avime is teaching us is that Kibud Vaem can't be quantified by an objective measure because it's all relative to the context and to the way it's done and what the desire of the parent is. And in particular, I think this is a contrast to the Dama ben Asina story, where we're saying, in that particular case, it was such an important act of kibud to not disturb his father, that was an exemplary kibud avayim. But if a person's father or mother would want to be woken up, then the mitzvah would be to wake them up. That it's all dependent on the context and on the way that it's presented as kibud avayim. But the purpose of the stories above are to say, independent of the context, the extent of Kibud Vaem is that far, is 600,000 or 800,000 coins. That it's an extreme measure, but the particular form of what should be done is relative to the context and the situation. Amar Rivahu comes with his own explanation of how much Kibud Vaem. Kigon Avimi Bri, a model of Kibud Vaem is my son Avime. Kiye mitzvahs Kibud Chamisha b'nei Samchi Havile Lavime b'Chayi Aviv. That he had 5 sons with smicha. In other words, he was very busy with his own family. V'chi havi asa Rabbi Avahu, when Rabbi Avahu would come, the grandfather. Kari Abava, he would knock at the door. Rahid va'azil, he would run. Upasach lei, to open the door. V'amar, in. He would, on his way to the door, he would say, yeah, I'm coming. He would hurry to do Kibud Vaem, and while he was on his way, before he actually did it, he would communicate the fact that he's coming quickly to perform Kibud Vaem. Yom Echad, one day, Amar le Ashkin Maya, his father asked him for a cup of water. Ada Aisile, while he was waiting for his father, Nimname, the father, while he was getting the water for his father dozed off. Gachin koyale adi itzer, and he stood above him, waiting for when he'll wake up, so that he'll be ready to give him the water as soon as he wakes up. Istaye milte v'darash avime mizmor la'asaf. During that time that he was waiting, he had siyata d'shmaya, the help of God, to finally understand the mizmor of Tehillim, mizmor la'asaf, that a mizmor that gave him great difficulty in understanding for a long time. Until then, at this moment, as presumably a reward for his kibud, God gave him the insight to figure out this mizmor. And Tosfos discusses at length what exactly troubled him about the mizmor and what his final interpretation was. But for the purpose of this Gemara, this is a representation of the reward that he received for Kibud Vaem. Amar le Rav Yaakov Baravua la Abaye Kegonana da'ada asina be Rav Abba Madli le Kasa v'imi Mazgali Hechi Yavid. So here you have an interesting question. Ashayla, the student says, whenever I come home, my parents take such great care of me. They're feeding me, they're giving me drinks, my father's pouring me a cup of wine, my mother's preparing it. How do I react to this? How do I perform Kibud Vaem, or am I allowed to receive this? If Kibud Vaem is this incredible extent of how far one should go to serve his parents, I have a problem. My parents served me constantly. So how do I relate to this situation? Amrle, he responded, "Me imcha kabil, me avucha lo tekabel." I think that you should allow your mother to serve you, but not your father. Because I have a suspicion that your father, being an esteemed scholar, would be actually a little bit depressed if you would accept his service. Your mother, I think she really wants to do the service for you. So in your situation, it's appropriate to accept what she's doing for you. But from your father, I think you should say, no, thank you. because I think he would actually prefer that. And here I think the Gemara is introducing an important principle about Kibud Vaem, that again there's a dimension which is relative to the person, and trying to determine what the will of the father and the mother is particular to each family, and a person has to evaluate what the parent really wants, regardless of what they're saying. And in this example, the evaluation was made to make a distinction between the father and the mother, and this is an important evaluation that needs to be made when relating to Kibud Vaem. Rabbi Tarfon Havalehahi Ima Dechol Emas Tavaboy Lemesak Lapuria Gachim Vesalakla. Rabbi Tarfon had his mother, whenever she would have to get into bed, he would bend over and help her. V'chol Emas Tahavas Nachis Nachta Lavei. Whenever she would have to come off, she would descend the bed upon him. Also, he came to the Medrash all proud of his performance of Kibud Vaem. Amrili, they told him, his trusted friends told him, you have not accomplished even half of your responsibility. Did she ever throw your wallet into the sea, and did you at that point resist embarrassing her or getting angry at her? So the Gemara here, story after story tries to express that Kibud Vaem is an incredibly large mitzvah, and the shiur, in a word, we ask, what's the shiur of Kibud Vaem? How much Kibud Vaem must be done? In a word, the answer is a lot. Story after story showing how extreme Kibud Vaem should go. And when you think about the nature of Kibud Vaem, whether it's a mitzvah which is ben adam lachavero, it's the least you can do for those people who are responsible for our lives, or whether it's a mitzvah ben adam lamakom, that it's not personal to them, but God wants us to respect our parents because of whatever reason, or because it represents our relationship to God. So it's possible that to the extent that our parents are representations of God, or a stepping stone to respecting God, because we see our parents and we see God, our connection to God in the same way, the more that it's been azal makom, and the more that it's parents being similar to God, I think the more sense it makes to be this extreme about Kibud Vaem, to go to extraordinary lengths. And the Gemara that we'll conclude here expresses this as well. Rav Yosef ki avishama kol kara de'imei, when he would hear his mother's footsteps coming, Amar, he would say, Ekum makame shchina da'asya, I must rise before the shchina that's coming. And here I wonder if Rav Yosef is merely saying that he loves his mother and she's great and she's like the shchina, or in particular, a person should respect his parents as a link to our connection to God Himself, to creation from God, and in that respect, the shiurim are so extreme, and we should really see our parents as our connection to God. Eikum Makame Shechina Da'asya, that the parents represent the Shechina which is approaching us.